everybody, it's Laney. Today I wanted to talk to you about a little project that involves the grill. Now, aside from woodworking, cooking on the grill is one of the things that I really enjoy. So I found out a way to combine the two. And it's a neat little tip that uses up some of that sawdust that you have laying around the shop that you end up throwing away after each project. It's called a Sawdust Fire Starter. So stick with me, we'll get right into it, and I'll show you how it's done. Well, like all woodworkers, after each project I end up with a bunch of sawdust that usually just gets thrown away. There's a lot of uses for sawdust, and today I'm going to talk to you about one of them. Today we're going to make sawdust fire starters. These fire starters are made by using sawdust and paraffin wax. What you'll need is some sawdust, a candle, or some wax. Now, I buy my wax at a hobby store, and it's called Crafting Candles Paraffin Wax. I buy mine in the blocks because I use a lot of it to make these fire starters. What I end up doing is, on some of my sawdust, it does get thrown away. However, I bag up a lot of it to use for these fire starters. First thing I did was took some scrap melamine and I made a form. It's just a simple box that will help shape the fire starters. Comes with a lid, and once I put the wax and sawdust mixture in, I simply place the lid in, clamp it down, and it helps compress everything together. Now, you don't have to use a form. You can simply use a cupcake pan and make what's called cupcake fire starters. Now, the benefit of using the form is it makes these nice little blocks, and I can use these for camping, grilling, or as a part of my survival kit when I'm out hiking. Today, when we make these, we're going to use what's called a double boiling method. And what that consists of is taking a pot, filling it with water, and then placing a second pot on top of that where our mixture of sawdust and paraffin wax will go in. It's kind of a recommended method for making candles as well as these fire starters. So let's get right into it. The first thing you're going to need is to get yourself a couple of pots. The first pot is going to be where you pour your water in, bring it to a boil. Your second pot will be where you mix your ingredients. Now, you can use 2 pots on your stove in your home, but the one thing is you want to make sure of is that it's a well ventilated area. I happen to have a bean pot, and I don't make that many beans, so it works out perfectly to become part of my shop in making these little fire starters. So what you want to do is pour some water in, heat it up and bring it to a boil. Add your second pot and let it start warming up. From there, you can take either your candle or your wax, however you decide to do it, and break it up. It'll help melt faster, or you can just put it in there and it'll just take a little bit longer for it to melt. On my blocks of paraffin wax, I cut up as much as I need to kind of get a 1-to-1 mixture, 1 part wax to 1 part sawdust. And when the way I measure that is I'll chunk out the paraffin wax and let it melt, and then I'll kind of determine how much wax is in there and add the sawdust accordingly until I get a nice consistency of sawdust and wax. Then you can use a stick or a spoon or anything to mix this. I use my hand because everything comes right from the pot right into the mold. It's a little warm, but it's just the way I do it. So once the wax gets nice and melted, you can take and add your sawdust, however much you determine that you need for whatever you're going to make. Now, I actually pre-measure mine by placing sawdust in my mold, and that amount of sawdust is what I end up pouring in to my mixture, so that way my mold is nice and full when it gets ready to get packed down. So while the wax is melting, I prep my mold, and I'll take either a little bit of oil or even some finishing wax and I'll wax my mold, and that way it helps the fire starter block to fall right out when everything gets all set up. Now you don't have to use a mold. Like I said earlier, you can use a cupcake pan and some cupcake papers to make your fire starters. This method is great. Everything works the same and all. I just like the mold, as I said, because my fire starters I use for hiking as part of my survival kit, and as well as out on the grill or campfire starting. Once everything is greased up and ready to go and everything's melted, you're going to take your mixture and start filling your mold. Try not to make a mess with the water. Let's pull this out of here. And it is warm, so you might want to use a glove or something like that. I'm just so used to it because I make these all the time that I'm pretty much used to it. So once it's all in there, if you have any left over, you can make another mold later. I place my lid on top, and of course it's not going to go all the way in because my mold is full of sawdust. But that's where the clamps come in handy. I take my clamps and pack everything down. And it's going to stay like that until it starts to cool a little bit. And once it starts to cool, then it'll kind of keep that about a half hour of cooling. I go ahead and I take the clamps off. And I place my mold in the freezer. And what that does is it really makes everything solid. So a couple hours in the refrigerator or freezer, and you're ready to go. After about 2 hours, I take my mold out of the freezer and right back out to the shop. Now I use my miter saw to cut my blocks up. As you take your mold out, you've got a nice hard block of fire starters that you can size or shape any way you'd like. I shape mine 2 inches by 1.5 inches. They work well for my survival kits as well as the grill or starting campfires. Now the one thing that I do with mine, because I also sell these at different little craft fairs and things, I sell my fire starters, and what I do is I take sheets of wax paper and I cut them to size, place my blocks in, and I package them up almost like wrapping a present. The wax paper actually helps with the igniting process. They can be set right on the grill or right in the campfire just like that. You take one of the loose ends, light it, and it'll burn real nicely. Well everyone, I hope you think this was a neat little project. It's a great use for sawdust and pretty easy to make. Be sure to stop by Facebook and say hi. Simple Design of Ocala. Talk to you soon.